Welcome to the Big Fundamental Podcast, a San Antonio Spurs podcast brought to you by Ken's 5, the official TV station of the Spurs. I am Jackson Floyd, and joining me today on the podcast, we've got Ken's 5 sports director, Joe Reinagel. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm great. A lot of stuff going on, so a lot to talk about today. Ready to get to it.
A lot to talk about, including some breaking news off the top. But first, we've got real Tom Petrini from Ken's 5 Sports in the building with us as well. How you doing today, Tom?
You guys can't see it, but Jackson really is like that way from me.
We don't want to give too much into the inside baseball. I mean, we've still got to project the illusion, we're three different spots, kind of our own boxes. But no, we are all back in the building. We're still taking COVID precautions spread out across. We've got Joe in Studio B, Tom in the digital production center here with me. So it's good to see everybody. Good to be back in the building. And of course, even though we're back in the building, we're taking those precautions, those protocols, because COVID-19 is still an issue. And that's the breaking news off the top. Team USA is running into some COVID-19 situations with the team there. They've just put 2 players into the health and safety protocols. They just announced that Bradley Beal will not be with the team when they go to Tokyo in 9 days. And Jeremy Grant is in health and safety protocols. No announcement on whether or not his status on the team. I think it still is up in the air. I don't think they've fully said he's not going to be traveling with the team, but it doesn't look good. And I mean, Joe, you and I just passed each other in the hallway and just kind of said, look, one guy on a team can expose the whole team. We saw that throughout the entire regular season for the NBA. I mean, the Spurs had a couple guys exposed, and that derailed kind of the season for a few weeks for the Spurs, as plenty of players were in the COVID protocol. What does this mean for Team USA moving forward, Joe?
Well, it's interesting because we just watched Coach Pop and Bradley Beal on the podium the other night after they beat Argentina. So, and then obviously Beal was all over the floor with his teammates, all of them. He had a great game against the Argentinians. So, it's a scary deal, and I'm sure Pop's a little concerned about it. Anybody that's a Team USA fan should be concerned about it. Hopefully it won't spread like wildfire throughout the whole team, but it is something to be concerned about. And with the the COVID outbreak they're having in Japan right now, that's certainly a concern. So something to watch over the next few days for sure.
Tom, are you expecting to see more players or coaches or staff enter health and safety protocols as this kind of evolves?
I mean, it really depends on, maybe this is sort of a wake-up call. I know a lot of people have gotten vaccinated and are sort of getting back into, more pre-pandemic type activities, but I think it's an important reminder for everybody that, this thing's still going on, and the Delta variant is part of a pretty big rise here in San Antonio, and we're seeing that in a lot of other places as well. So, it wouldn't surprise me certainly, but then something that a lot of Spurs fans here have noted with Beal and now Jeremy Grant maybe not going, who fills that spot? And it might be Keldon Johnson, who has played pretty well with Team USA after being called up from the select team because Middleton, Drew Holiday, and Devin Booker are still playing in the finals. Yeah,
and it remains to be seen when those guys rejoin the team, because it looks like these finals could go 7 games. We just saw the Bucks even it up last night behind a remarkable performance from Giannis and from Chris Middleton as well.
Do you remember Pop's first media availability of last season? When
that was decades ago.
It was decades ago. But somebody asked him, Coach, so Game 7 of the finals is going to be like a day or two before the opening ceremonies of the Olympics. Like, is that going to be tough for you? Like, coaching in the finals and whatnot, like as a joke. And he was like, well, I don't think we'll let the finals get to 7 games.
I do remember it now. It rings a bell.
It was a very fun moment. But like for Booker and Middleton and Holiday, that's going to be a reality.
Yeah. Now, so is it more likely then, Joe, that a guy like Keldon Johnson or Darius Garland, these 2 guys who are on the select team who've been playing with Team USA in these guys' absence, is it more likely they get the call from Team USA to go to Tokyo to replace Bradley Beal or possibly Jeremy Grant? Or is Team USA making phone calls to other guys, maybe like Trae Young first?
Don't sleep on Sadiq Bey either, man.
I'm sorry.
The Sadiq Bey arrangement cannot stand. We respect Sadiq
I'm sure they are, but the fact that the guys you just mentioned are there they're playing with the team and they're there, I would think they would get some consideration. And as you mentioned, Tom, I mean, Keldon Johnson has played well in his limited amount of time that he's been on the floor in these exhibition games. So I think they've got to be looking at him. They have to be. And you got to look at the other guys that you just mentioned that are still in the finals. I mean, if you're talking about 2 or 3 days or even a week, these guys need to rest a little bit. They're playing hard, so they're not going to be available, I wouldn't think, for an extended amount of minutes anyway, once they get to Tokyo. So I think it bodes well for Keldon Johnson. I felt kind of bad because last night when we're talking about Bradley Beal, this is before we knew about Jeremy Grant. I was like, hey, this is maybe great news for Keldon Johnson. And I had to pull back a little bit. That's obviously not great news, and I don't want anybody to get COVID. But I think this might be a great opportunity for Keldon Johnson, and I think he would relish it. I think he would do very well on that big stage.
I would agree with you, and that kind of plays into a take I'm workshopping that I'll run past you guys. We've seen Keldon Johnson as a member of the Rising Stars team, that kind of getting that national recognition there. Now he's on the select team, playing with Team USA in these exhibition games, maybe working his way up towards the Tokyo Olympics. Is he the new face of the Spurs? And when it comes to the national attention the Spurs get, is he the guy that should be the focal point of this team?
I mean, he's certainly making a lot of noise, and Olympic gold medalist Keldon Johnson is not off the table at this juncture, which is pretty crazy.
It reminds me of one of my favorite Oscar moments. I don't know if you remember. I remember in 2005, Jon Stewart was hosting the Oscars, and they just awarded Best Original Song to 3 6 Mafia for their role for their song for Hustle and Flow. And he steps on the stage and says, "That's 1 Oscar for 3 6 Mafia, 0 Oscars for Martin Scorsese." So I mean, we could be looking at one gold medal for Keldon Johnson, no gold medals for Tim Duncan.
Right?
Yeah,
for real.
So we're seeing Keldon Johnson shine, and that's the point here. And he's in contention for that call up. Who isn't shining is maybe Team USA in general. As we watch these exhibition games, there's a lot that goes into it. But what have been your takeaways? Going into this, the Team USA was 54-2 in exhibition play with professional basketball. So since 1992, when professional basketball players could join, 54-2, they doubled that loss total over the weekend with losses to Nigeria and Australia. It's exhibition. Joe, how worried are you?
I'm not worried. I think these guys are having a difficult time, at least early on, figuring out the rules, right? Because you look at them and they're still trying to, bump into guys to draw a foul. That just doesn't happen in this type of play. And so coming right off of the NBA season, I think they're still in that mindset, and they're still trying to do the same things they do, back here in the States when they're playing for their specific team. So I think they're just having a hard time getting used to it. They look much better, obviously, against Argentina. And I think it's just going to take some time and some reps. Obviously, these next 2 exhibition games will be huge, and they will tell the tale as to whether this team is ready to go once they hit Tokyo. But I just think it's an adjustment period. And now with Beal and possibly Grant out, that might prolong things, which, again, speaks well for Keldon Johnson because he's already been there. So I'm not worried about this team at all.
Tom, with the Olympics 9 days away, is there time to make those adjustments, to feel it out, to get used to this, and to gel as a team?
I think that we've seen in the past couple days, even if you assemble basketball Avengers and throw them out on the court together and they're all individually great, it's still a 5-on-5 team game, and you still need to figure that part out. A lot of these international teams, in addition to adding NBA talent over the years, they've also been playing together as a unit, for a very long time. And you've got that. You've got what Joe mentioned with the FIBA rules, which I've got to say, hugely refreshing. Watching those games and seeing foul baiting just not get rewarded, and instead the ref is just that was a weird decision. I love that. I personally love that. It hasn't worked out great for Team USA, but that's a little bit more pure. And the transition take fouls as well. Yeah. They call that it's a clear path foul.
Yeah.
If you disrupt the transition break with a lazy, grab foul. I love that. But I think we've needed to see more intensity, more defense, more of a really an intensity. And honestly, I think that's a big reason why I think that Keldon Johnson would be a good fit on this team for the Olympics, because he provides that. And he's a guy who doesn't need the ball. You can put him in the corner, let him space the floor, slash, get after rebounds and play hard defense.
Yeah.
So, when you build a team and it's mostly superstars, you kind of wind up lacking that like grit element. So I think that really, when Pop was asked, like, what are you trying to teach these players? What are you trying to impart on them? He didn't say appropriate fear, but that's what he was saying, was respect that everybody in this tournament can beat us.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if how much Pop is relishing these losses, what that means to the team, because he's someone. I mean, he's someone who's been, I guess, he's drawn the biggest spotlight through all of this. The criticism towards the team, it's pointing back to Popovich. Does he know how to coach basketball anymore? We've seen the Spurs don't play normal NBA basketball. They're not shooting threes. Is Pop tends to like ISO players, was a criticism or something I read earlier, which I thought was really funny and encouraging ISO basketball, which is, Popovich is a coach who plays to the guys he have, and if he's given a roster of ISO scorers, he's going to make ISO basketball work. He's still going to be Popovich, though. He's still going to work into his own thing. But he got into it with one reporter who was kind of like, we watched the Nigerian team 9 years ago. You got, the Olympics team beat them by 60, 50, 53 points, I think. And then Nigeria, you guys beat them 3 years ago by 30 and things like that. How can you lose to this team? And Pop, I don't think he made his point as accurately as he was trying to, but he was trying to say that never happened. He was saying, that never happened. That never happened. I mean, those scores clearly did happen, but that wasn't the same Nigerian team. This is a Nigerian team that's head coached by Mike Brown, who's been to the NBA Finals with the team, who's currently assisting coaching the Golden State Warriors. He's a coach of notable repute. This is a Nigerian team with NBA players on it. I think I might be misremembering this, but I think I read they've got somewhere in the top 5 amount of NBA players on their roster. So this is a stacked team. This isn't the team that we saw in 2016. Or that we saw in exhibition in 2018. International basketball has changed exponentially. I memean, even since we talked about, it's a big conversation point since 2004 when Manu led Argentina over that team. But international basketball has consistently changed and exponentially changed over that time, especially as we watch some of the best players in the NBA being international players. Luka Doncic isn't suiting up for Team USA. He's over there with Slovenia. Giannis Antetokounmpo isn't suiting up for Team USA. He's with Greece. Jokic, isn't in the Olympics this year, but he would be with the Serbian team. These guys are the best players in the NBA right now, and the Team USA has to kind of realize that they can't rely on a high ceiling. They've got to play with the high floor and play as a team, and that's goes further beyond than Popovich. I know I kind of went on a rant there a little bit, but Joe, do you think that the message that Popovich is delivering to this team is these guys can beat us any given night?
No, absolutely. He has to be given that message because they can. It's not like the Harlem Globetrotters against the Washington Senators anymore. I mean, it used to be that way when they first assembled the best players from the NBA to go play. I mean, they were just wiping the floor with everybody. And it's not that way anymore. European players now are a big, big part of the NBA, and they're superstars in the NBA, and they can play. And now they're playing for their home countries. And I look at that Australian team, and you're seeing Patty Mills and Joe Ingles and a lot of guys that you normally hear, that are playing here in the NBA. So it's a different ball game. And I think you're right in a way. Pop doesn't mind the losses. I really don't think so. And I think sometimes that's the only way to get to some of these players who have the mindset. Bradley Beal said as much the other night. When I used to watch the Olympics, the United States would just kick everybody's behind. And it's just not like that anymore. And I think it's a mindset that he has to get into these guys that are on this particular team, that we can't just show up in our USA jerseys and these guys are going to be scared of us anymore. They want to beat us. We're the team everybody wants to beat, and we're going to get everybody's best every night. So I think these losses, in a way, are good. I mean, they mean absolutely nothing in the scheme of things other than to get these guys prepared for what they're going to see over in Tokyo.
I'm glad you brought up Australia because we saw FIBA Patty rear his ugly head again. He is just so remarkable on the international stage when he's playing for Team Australia because he is the focal point. I know Tom had some conversations with people on Twitter about what he means to Team Australia versus the Spurs and the role he plays for the team. But I mean, he's shown once again against Team Australia, against Team USA in this exhibition play.
Yeah, no, I mean, I saw a lot of people saying like, "Oh, Patty does this for Australia, but never for the Spurs," and I guarantee you, anybody who said that would lose their mind if Patty attempted 20 shots in a game for the San Antonio Spurs. The website would just like be on fire because that's not his role.
Yeah,
he's a bench shooter for the San Antonio Spurs. For the Boomers, he's asked to be like the 6-foot-tall Steph Curry essentially, and he really does his best to do that. Team USA got a lot of really good basketball players, but they might not have a single guy who could guard Patty Mills ISO. Like, he was putting KD on skates. He was going past Draymond Green. Putting the ball on the floor. And, people, that's another one of my favorite things. It's like every 2 years, people will see Patty Mills do this on the international stage and be like, wait, he can dribble? What? And, not realize that, he's like that. But, the best offense for the Spurs usually doesn't involve him initiating and playing as a traditional on-ball point guard.
Yeah. So Tom, what did you think of the respect that Keldon Johnson paid his Spurs teammate when he went up to the rack to put it up and scores on Patty? He doesn't do his signature trademark yelling.
It would have been very funny if he flexed on Patty. That would have been hilarious. There was an amazing still image from one of the games where Zach LaVine had fallen and was like, "Hey, somebody get me up," and Keldon is just over him and you need a guy with that sort of energy.
Yeah,
he just brings just manic child energy.
Yeah,
and it's so pure and so fun. And
what's great about that? I don't think Patty would have minded. I really don't. I think Patty would have thought it was funny. So, I wish he would have done that. But, he's respecting his elders, right? But I think Patty would have laughed at it.
Yeah. Speaking of respecting your elders, this is a quick aside, but I just got to shout out Louis Scola for his transformation from stringy, long-haired, skinny Argentinian to, I don't know, Batfleck. He kind of looks like Ben Affleck in Justice League.
Jacked.
So I saw a lot of people comparing him to the X-Men character Colossus or Cable, just these ripped dudes. 42 years old. I don't know how you do it, but it's very impressive. So respect to your elders there.
I think he's just been lifting weights since his NBA career ended. It wouldn't surprise me if he's just been doing bicep curls and head crushers for I don't know, 10 hours a day.
I mean, he put in the work and it shows. So before we move on for Olympic stuff, they've got 2 more exhibition games coming up. They play, Australia one more time, and then they play Spain, and then they Olympic basketball begins July 24th, so it's just right around the corner there. Looking back at the last weekend of basketball we saw, the question a lot of people asking on Twitter was, is Coach Popovich washed?
You posed it to the room?
I just had to let the silent slinger there. Just the stupidity of the question. So you don't think he's going to retire from the Spurs right now based on the last weekend of basketball is what I'm hearing. So.
See, the first 2 games, I was like, wow, maybe Greg Popovich is a bad basketball coach. But then they beat Argentina, and I was like, oh, no, wait, he's good.
They had leads in both the games, too. And
so you're that guy on Twitter, I see.
He's got a lot of burners out there. No, we'll see Popovich back on the Spurs bench next season. That's a guarantee. A guy we won't see on the Spurs bench, though, is Will Hardy, the Spurs assistant coach, joining Ime Udoka, another former Spurs assistant who was recently hired as the Boston Celtics head coach. Will Hardy will be an assistant coach on that Celtics bench. I quickly just want to throw out, in the name of Big Fun, a few names from what I think might be most likely to least likely to fill that spot. So here's the names I want to throw out to you guys. Just quickly, if you think, on a scale of 10, how likely he is a considerable candidate for the role here. Brett Brown, formerly of the 76ers, also a former Spurs assistant. thoughts that he might be on joining the Spurs bench? Tom,
where's he at now? Is he?
He's nowhere. He's just floating. So he's a free agent in that sense.
That could be.
It wouldn't surprise me, but then what do? I mean, Brett Brown is not a down the bench coach, right? He's a first assistant or a head coach. So then you've got all the what are you going to do? What happens to Becky Hammon in that case? And so I don't think a name like Brett Brown will do that. Unless he just wants to be here and come back to San Antonio and be on Pop's bench again. But I think it's going to be an up-and-comer, somebody that, like a Will Hardy, for example, that just kind of moves up or comes in and is trying to work their way up to becoming a head coach in the NBA one day.
So, Joe.
Because Will Hardy will be.
Yeah. So, Joe, how about Matt Nielsen of the Austin Spurs? He's only been there since November 2020 as the head coach. Could they bring him up the ranks?
Absolutely. Why not? I think the sky's the limit when you go there. I think there are a lot of young up-and-comers to choose from. And certainly he's a possibility for sure, but I think there's a lot of up-and-comers. And, Pop has been able to pull some people out of nowhere and bring them in and who had ever heard of Will Hardy? Right. I mean, he comes out of nowhere, and he's really shown that he's got a good basketball IQ. And, so there's a lot to choose from, and I think whoever takes that spot is fortunate and has a bright future ahead of him.
I just got to say, shout out Will Hardy, man! Like former intern,
yeah,
like video,
yeah,
like he was putting in work, like watching film till his eyes bled.
I mean, that's the Spoelstra path, right? Former video guy getting rising.
Well, and also, and the name escapes me. He went off. He was the head coach of the Orlando Magic for a while. I'll think of it. I lost it. That's old age, fella. Sorry.
It's okay. Are you talking about Jacques Vaughn?
No, I'm not talking about. I can see his face, but I can't think of his name. He started out with Spurs in the film room and worked his way up to become a head coach. He went to Orlando, and then he was somewhere else as well. And the name escapes me at the moment.
No worries.
I'll think of it.
Just quickly, Tom, could it be a former player from the Spurs? There's a couple guys out there. Tiago Splitters with the Nets. LaMarcus Aldridge, someone on Twitter asked him if he wanted to join the Nets assistant coaching staff, and he was like, I'm available. Could he maybe join the Spurs assistant coaching staff instead? And then a guy who is linked to a Spurs open assistant coaching position 2 years ago was Manu Ginobili. Could he maybe want to come back into the fold?
I mean, Manu seems to be really enjoying riding his bike and seeing beautiful natural, places with his family.
Who wouldn't, right?
Yeah, and by all means, he should absolutely enjoy the hell out of his retirement.
Yeah,
I certainly would.
All right, the biggest and funnest name for you guys. Would it be the best move for the Spurs if Patty Mills retires after Olympics basketball and joins the Spurs assistant coaching staff? He's already kind of in that player coach role, in the summer league. I mean, the Orlando bubble, he didn't play. He coached the team alongside the other guys. Could he maybe join the assistant coaching ranks and then clear up some more of that? We've got a lot of we talk about a logjam at the guard position that kind of clears some things up there. I wonder if the Spurs maybe poke the bear there and just see if there's any interest.
I think that it would. If that happened, it would be an unofficial thing.
Yeah.
And it would be like if they would probably, if that was in their plans, they would bring him back on like a 1-year deal, see what he's got, and if they want to go another direction, then it would be like a short-term thing because he's still got buckets to get. I mean, we just saw him lead the game in scoring in a game that had Kevin Durant and Jason Tatum and Damian Lillard and Bradley Beal and all of those guys. So and it's kind of how I felt with Tony when he got to the end here in San Antonio, where he had every right to be like, no, I still got buckets to get and go and get those buckets. So Patty Mills would be a great coach, but what is he, 32?
Yeah, he's not close. He's not near retirement. Like I said, big and fun. just throwing it out there.
He's still really fast too.
Yeah.
So I think and his game, I think, will continue to age well.
Yeah.
So whether or not you want him playing more than 15 minutes for the Spurs, that's another question. But I think in terms of coaching, he'll be a great one when that day comes, but that day
Yep.
will probably be a little down the road.
All right. Okay.
And I can see Patty going back to his home country of Australia, right, and doing something there as far as basketball goes.
Yeah.
You know, as much as he loves his country and as much as he does for the people there, I can see that happening too. But I'm with Tom here. I think Patty thinks he's got more years and a lot more fuel in the tank to play before that coaching job comes up.
Absolutely. Now, so we don't really know who's going to fill that position. The Spurs, like you said, they could pull someone, a diamond from the rough, someone that we don't really know or haven't really considered for that role. So it'll be interesting to see who's on there. I think a month ago, if you had told me there would have been an assistant coach who wasn't coming back next year, it would have been Becky Hammon, the name that I thought of first, A little surprised to see that it's Will Hardy, I know, getting an assistant coaching role elsewhere, but moving on, and Becky staying behind, even as she was considered a finalist for the Portland Trailblazers role. A lot of backlash to how the Trailblazers handled the hiring of Chauncey Billups, and not necessarily the hiring of him, but how they treated Becky Hammon in that role. Neil Olshey, the general manager for the Blazers, spoke to just how great Becky did and being able to get up to the ownership ranks and things like that. And there were comments on Twitter about, is that misogynistic, the way he's treating that? Was Becky a PR move in the midst of hiring Chauncey Billups, who has a 1997 sexual assault accusation that was settled out of court? And that kind of conversation was kind of bubbling around that job. That's calmed down a little bit in the wake of the finals continuing, and as the news cycles do, these things comes in waves. But Becky Hammon did speak to a CNBC and Jabari Young, and just kind of weighed in, saying she's not bitter about not getting the job, that she gained a greater understanding of the process. She also added that she's ready for the opportunity once that the right team is ready, and that it's a competitive business. That she knew she was going to be second. She knew who they wanted through the process, and she's okay with that. And that's the way she's treated every race. She's always been behind in races throughout her life because of her gender in the sport. So she's someone who's going to keep plugging ahead, and when the right team is ready, be it the Spurs in a year or two, or someone else who's going to come knocking, and other teams will come knocking, be it for a PR move like the Blazers did, or to seriously consider her. We haven't talked about the Becky Hammon thing, the fallout from that, and the process since she was named a finalist, due to just the nature of how this podcast schedule has worked during the off season. But Tom, what was your takeaway from her comments to Jabari Young there?
I mean, I think she basically said it all, right? And she had a pretty good quote here. Throw everything out of the window. If you want to hire me, you'll find a reason to hire me. And if you don't want to hire me, you'll find that reason too. And that's just that. And nailed it. And even though the Blazers had a very good reason not to hire Chauncey Billups, that was their guy. In that very awkward press conference, Neil Olshey was asked about the process for investigating that 97 case, and he basically said that's proprietary and we're not going to tell you anything about it. And the question was about what did you guys do? How did you go about this? What work was done? And the attorney for the alleged victim reportedly, according to, I believe, Oregon Public Radio, said it would be news to them that they conducted an investigation. So, when you hired that guy with that controversy, and then you've had Becky the whole time, and people understandably get upset that you could have made history, hired the first woman NBA coach, which, by the way, she really just cares about being hired for her qualifications. And she says that over and over again. She doesn't want it to be a big deal that she's a woman. And instead you hire somebody with a pretty credible accusation for something like that in this age, and a lot of people were upset. There was a lot of blowback, and a report came out from Bleacher Report that cited anonymous sources that really could have only been Olshey or somebody close to him. That was Becky was a finalist, but they heard from people with the Spurs that she really wasn't that great at like the day-to-day coaching stuff, which I think everybody saw that and was like,
yeah,
that's doesn't smell right. Like, anybody who's ever worked with Becky Hammon on a basketball court, Pau Gasol wrote a really good Players Tribune piece about how she just knows the game.
Sure did.
And she wasn't just a WNBA player. Like, she was one of the greatest. Like, and honestly, like, play style, not too dissimilar from Dame Lillard. Like, in terms of shot profile and general, ability and position and things like that. She could ball, and she is on Greg Popovich's staff because she deserves to be there.
Yeah.
She's been here for 7 years now. She would not be in San Antonio on the coaching staff if she was leaving a whole lot to be desired. So everybody who saw that, I think, treated it with a very high degree of skepticism that it was real.
Yeah.
Because it just seemed so out there and ridiculous. Well,
it was totally ridiculous. Let's get to the ugly truth here, okay? And even in this day and age, no one is willing to take that chance. I mean, that's a huge thing. The media attention is going to be enormous when Becky Hammon or another female coach is hired. It's going to be enormous. The spotlight is going to be so bright on that particular team, whoever it is. Teams right now, and I'm going to say team management, and I'm going to say players as well, are just not willing and ready to pull the trigger on a hire like that. I just don't think so. You're going to find excuses like Portland made that we all agree is ridiculous. And I just believe that even in this day and time, it's going to take somebody with enormous guts to finally say, Becky Hammon is the person we want. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care about the spotlight. We're going to hire her. And I just believe in my heart that right now, there's not that team out there. Maybe it's the Spurs. Maybe they have to be the trailblazers that they've already been. Maybe that's the case. But I just honestly believe in my heart of hearts that nobody is ready to do that. And it's not just management. I think it's players as well. They're saying, we're not ready for this. The players that have been with Becky, I think would be fine with it. But the players that haven't, I think they're a little hesitant. And those are my thoughts, and I just believe that's what's happening right now.
Joe, if that's the case, that's a shame. That
it is. I agree with you. I agree.
And honestly, I think that those teams' hesitancy due to maybe an increased spotlight from the media might be overvaluating the situation. I don't think there would be judging every move she makes based on her gender or based on her being a woman. I think that there would be a little bit more of a I don't know. I don't think that criticism would be there from the media. I mean, there would be people, talking heads on air, who need to fill time on their debate shows who will bring it up. But overall, I think the national media would be much more, wouldn't take that leap, wouldn't take if the team struggled, if she lost 2 games in a row, 3 games in a row, they wouldn't make the jump to, well, they did that because she's a woman. Now, from the player's perspective, I do think there may be more hesitancy, like you're saying, from players who haven't been around a woman assistant coach. But Becky Hammon is not the only one. There are plenty of other women in the league. I think the Pelicans have an assistant coach who's a woman. The Boston Celtics had an assistant coach who was a woman. It's becoming more widespread, and I think that being exposed to that and having that, being in that position, will change players' minds. And I think that a lot of the younger generation, the majority of the younger generation, is probably going to be more fine with it than the guys who are over 30. And like you said, her being around the Spurs makes it probably the best opportunity for her, the best chance for every single player on that team to embrace her as the head coach, because they've seen her success. A lot of the guys on this team, like DeJounte Murray, watched her win the summer league. Were there on the sidelines when they won the summer league, right? Mm-hmm. Or was DeJounte? That was the year before DeJounte. Right. That was the year before DeJounte. But anyways, they've seen her successes. They've seen her take over the head coaching mantle from Popovich in a game. They've been around that, and they see the day-to-day with her and how successful and good she is as a coach. It's asinine for the Trailblazers to accuse the Spurs of saying anything negative about her when they would not have handed her the head coaching reins for a game when Popovich stepped away if she was bad at this. So
I think that, there are definitely going to be some people on the different teams who are resistant to this idea for really antiquated reasons. And I think that the Blazers are a prime example of that, because if it's harder to hire a woman, like in terms of like the public spotlight and things like that, than it is to hire somebody with, credible sexual assault allegations that you have to, then explain in the introductory press conference, but not really explain. Be like, yeah, we looked into it and everything's cool, and don't ask us any more questions about it. Like, how is that easier to do than doing something that, at least in terms of, what people would say publicly about it?
Is it because it's been done?
I mean,
that teams have gotten away with hiring people with credible allegations in their past.
Yeah.
And it smooths over, right? So,
yeah.
I mean.
Well, and guys, let's look at Damian Lillard. I mean, right there, Portland is trying to hang on to Lillard. They want him back, right? So, I'm sure he has some input. I'm not saying that he X'd Becky Hammon out of anything. I'm not saying that. However, I'm sure he had an input, and maybe he has a relationship with Chauncey Billups. Maybe they've worked together before. Maybe something that the Blazers thought was going to be better in their interest in keeping him around than hiring Becky Hammon that may not have, and maybe he goes somewhere else. It's all hypothetical, obviously, but all of that kind of stuff plays into this big time. And so, I mean, it's a very close-knit fraternity. You guys know that as well as anybody. And people have their thoughts, and they want who they want, and that's just the way it is, especially big-time players.
The thing that really pissed me off that Olshey said was, like, he was asked, like, directly, there are candidates with more experience, more coaching experience, including Becky Hammon. So why did you go with Chauncey as opposed to her or somebody like her? And then he goes into it and, kind of like half compliments Becky. It's great that you made it this far. And then, says, oh, well, Chauncey has this, like, gravitas, and, like, when he walks into a room, everybody just, like, pays attention and, like, listens to. And it's like he went with a whole bunch of compliments about Chauncey Billups, which, I mean, probably true. He's in terms of the coaching stuff, he's very highly regarded. But when you say it in that context, you're suggesting that Becky Hammon does not have that gravitas, which is hilarious because, like, I mean, especially in the Spurs organization, and I think people who know basketball too, like, she has earned a ton of respect, and I think that the people who are still at this point refusing to give it to her is a pretty obvious reason why.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we'll leave it at that. The other thing is, something we've talked about a little bit before that we don't know. Have the Spurs discussed, moving forward with her as the head coach after Pop goes? And, when people saw that report about Spurs talking bad, they were like, CIA Pop is trying to depress her value. Wouldn't the most CIA Pop thing be, okay, we know that you're the second choice here. We know that we're going to give you the head coaching gig. Why don't you go over there, gather as much intel as you possibly can, and then come and report back? And it might actually look really bad for them if you get far. So, that would be the most CIA Pop thing. I have no sources on this. It's just, the funniest possible thing that happened in my brain.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, and I think there's a lot of intel gathering to be done there. But I think just even if they use a ruse, like, downplaying Becky's role with the Spurs in order to keep her here, I think that looks bad down the road. Right.
That's not something they would ever do. No. Right. Like, because people talk. Yeah. Right. And like that would be a really bad thing for Becky Hammon to find out. Like, Oh, who's talking smack? Yeah, no, that would not be great.
So we're going to see Becky Hammon get the chance again next offseason to be the first woman head coach, to break that barrier again, whether or not it's with the Spurs. I'm sure her name will appear in other head coaching jobs that open up. There's going to be some head coaching jobs that open. That happens every season. My guess is the Rockets will be a team that may be looking for a head coach. She could just go down I-10 and coach down there. I would hate to see it.
That would be awful.
But I guess we'll have to revisit all this next offseason too, as all that plays out. We've got
wait a second, guys. Before we move on, James Borrego, the Charlotte Hornets. So I had it all wrong. James Borrego was the guy I was looking for.
The video
started as a film guy. Thank you for letting me unhang myself there.
Yeah, of course, Jim. Thank you. Of course, he went to Charlotte, and then Parker joined him that offseason as well. So we are 2 weeks away from the NBA draft. We are 3 weeks away from free agency. Becky Hammon's coming back. Are we seeing that we're going to see more of a consistent comeback for this team? Like, is this team going to be very similar in 3 weeks or in a month, once all this plays out, than it is now? Are the Spurs going to be a team that makes a big splash? Or are we seeing just dipping the toe in the pool? What do you guys see playing out over the next month? Tom,
I think that, anytime they've got a lottery pick in the draft, that in and of itself is splashier than most Spurs off seasons. Let's just be honest. Like, the 12th pick is certainly nothing to sneeze at, and there are going to be a lot of really talented players there. It would make sense for them to go with somebody who is taller than 6'6". If they draft another guard with the 12th pick, people are going to lose their minds, and that will fuel a ton of speculation about upcoming trades. Because that's something that, like, if they go guard direction, then it raises serious questions about the core of the team moving forward. At 12, though, there should be a bevy of really intriguing wings and big men who can all be potentially star players in their own special way. The guy that Spurs fans, I think, are most excited about is Kai Jones out of UT. 6'11" track star from the Bahamas, can jump out of the gym. Decent shooting mechanics that have pretty good potential. Would love to see him working with Chip. And that's the guy that I think if you ask most Spurs fans who you hope they get with 12, they're going to hope it's him. But then free agency, they're going to have like $53 million in cap space to play with. So they can do a lot of different things here coming up. Yeah.
Joe, do you remember what happened the last time the Spurs drafted a guy from the Caribbean who excelled in another sport? Who was
Let me think. I think they went on to win 5 championships when that happened, right?
That may be the only comparisons you can make between Kai Jones and Tim Duncan as players. I think
unrelated, but they might also go acquire a power forward out of Wake Forest.
There you go. There's options out there. So the next Tim Duncan should be arriving to the team. Now, Tom, you mentioned what would happen if they drafted the guard, and I think that's connected to some of the rumors we've seen out there. Joe, it sounds like, if you believe the scuttlebutt out there, that Derek White and DeJounte Murray are maybe on the move. There may be people who might be in trade talks. The Spurs may be open to sending one of them out. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I try to wrap my head around all of that, and I really don't see any of that. Now, maybe at Derek White, maybe the Spurs think his health is not going to be what they want it to be moving forward. That's the only thing I can think of. But look at DeJounte Murray, and he's come up in everything. And I had this argument with a guy on Twitter the other day that, if they get an opportunity to move up in the top 5 of the draft, they should trade DeJounte Murray immediately. And I'm like, well, all of those guys are good players in the top 5 that will be drafted, but are they as good as DeJounte Murray? And I'm just not sure that's the case, and it's simply because Murray's got years of experience in the NBA. And I think his game has improved. I certainly thought it improved last year. I just think Derek White and DeJounte Murray are 2 guys that I still believe that you can build a team around, certainly put some pieces in place. And unless you're going out and you're going to get, I've heard Pirtle, Murray, and White for Kemba Walker. I mean, would you guys make that trade? I wouldn't.
No.
I mean, so I don't understand. I really don't understand that anybody can go out there. Maybe they're just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. But I just don't see Derek White and DeJounte Murray being off of this team when the season starts this fall.
So I think the exact wording of it was could be gettable in trade discussions. And, I mean, I don't think that would be news about 99% of NBA players because, even the great ones are gettable for the right package, right?
Of course.
And so, when I heard that, though, I started to think about, okay, if there is truth to this, what would be the deals that would, that the Spurs might be considering putting them in? Like what would move the needle that much that they would part with one of these guys who, they really quite like. And if they could get into the top 5 of the draft, I think they would have to consider it because, if you look at a guy like Evan Mobley, I've not seen many 7-footers move like him or shoot like him or, play like him. He's a really special player. So if it's a top 5 pick and you've got to part with some pieces of the young core, they might consider that. I just wonder what team in the top 5, top 4 would be willing to part with that pick. Somebody mentioned Cavs and package the pick with Kevin Love and his bad contract. And, he's on Team USA with Pop and all of that. I don't really see the Spurs doing that.
Yeah.
I can see them kicking the tires on it with a lot of these things, but I would be shocked if they pulled off the lot. I really believe that DeJounte Murray and Derek White are going to be the starting backcourt for this team next year. But the other thing that I thought maybe this would be something where their names would get floated is a deal potentially for Ben Simmons.
Exactly. That's the kind of move that I think makes sense. That's the kind of needle moving move that makes these guys gettable. It's if you can get into the top 2 and maybe get Cade Cunningham or Evan Mobley, or you get a guy like Ben Simmons, whom has his faults. And they were on full display in the conference finals or the semifinals.
Like when that report went out that these guys could be gettable, everybody and their mom's like, oh, what if we traded this bad contract and a 2nd round pick and got DeJounte Murray? Yeah, what if? That would be cool for you.
Yeah.
No, they're not going to do a sign and trade and give DeJounte Murray for Lauri Markkanen. That's not going to happen.
Joe, is this just thirsty fan bases who want DeJounte Murray, who see how good of a young player DeJounte Murray is and see how good his contract is? Is that what this all dials down to?
Absolutely. I mean, and that was kind of my point, right? I think DeJounte Murray has improved to the point where he is a quality point guard, and I think he's got more room to improve to be even better than that. And so, yeah, I mean, he's very attractive. I mean, there's no question about it. I think he's very attractive, and that's why I don't think he leaves here unless you have something that is thrown in your face that you just can't do without. And I think that would take a lot. Now, it's certainly a lot more than what I've heard. And I think it's comical, and Tom mentioned this, but these guys are gettable. I mean, again, everybody's gettable for the right deal. That means absolutely nothing. So, and it's just that time of year where rumors fly around like mosquitoes. So it's just nuts.
We should talk about Ben Simmons because there was a reporter today who I'm not super familiar with, but has a hoop site here and said that the Spurs are reportedly interested in trading for Ben Simmons, and nothing on specifics of what a package would look like, but. That's the first that we have seen reported interest, and that.
But that's kind of like they're gettable.
Sure.
I mean, right? I mean, Spurs are interested. Of course, they're interested. But then it comes down to what would they have to give up for that, and is that worth it? So, it makes for good fodder and makes for great podcasts too.
It's not like Popovich hasn't spoken good things about Ben Simmons. I mean, he's a guy who talks a lot about, who offers a lot of praise to players, but he has said a lot of good things about Ben Simmons. And he's also a coach who excels, and we brought this up talking about Team USA, at finding the best from the players he's got. If he knows he has a lot of guys who excel at passing the ball, at finding the next man, he'll build a beautiful game system around that and let the players excel. If he's got two of the best mid-range shooters in the NBA, there might be a lot of mid-range falling, for this team. He finds what these teams do that excel. And so I think there may be some interest there is Ben Simmons is a guy who excels at a lot of things. He maybe doesn't excel at the one thing you want from him, which is scoring, but he's an amazing passer. He's really good at finding open shots. He's a great defender. I mean, he's been in the conversation as a defensive player of the year numerous times. You know who loves defense? Coach Popovich. So I could see this more than just kicking the tires.
Yeah, I think, though, the biggest question that I have about Ben Simmons is not about his shot. It's about why his shot hasn't improved in the years that he's been in the league. And it seems like one of those things where every summer they're like, okay, can you work on this? And he's like, yep. And then he comes back next year and, can't or won't shoot. And it got so bad in the playoffs this year that Game 7, he had an open dunk and passed out of it. And basically got called out after the game by Doc Rivers and Joel Embiid, and so there's friction there.
Yeah.
And the Sixers reportedly want a star player, all-star caliber player back. So in terms of best case scenario for the Spurs, if they know DeMar DeRozan isn't coming back and can work a deal around him, throw in some picks, and maybe some other players, but not key parts of that young core. But do the Sixers say yes to that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's what makes the most sense to me is if DeMar is involved in the trade, not DeJounte. But
right.
I mean, the Sixers might want DeJounte. And DeMar might not want to go to the Sixers, and that's a big part of the sign and trade there as well. Mm-hmm. I do want to end the podcast on some good vibes, though. We just talked about Ben Simmons, a player who went into the offseason with some very bad vibes. You mentioned that shot, he turns away from that dunk. It kind of reminds me of the Matt Sanchez butt fumble. It's just going to be always attached to him just for negative ways. I mean, Sanchez was not in the league much longer following that, and that didn't define him as a football player who led the Jets to the conference finals.
That was a butt fumble of a basketball play.
Exactly.
Sure.
But bringing the good vibes now, man, I mean, everything is trending up on the John Collins conversation. Tom, you put it out in the atmosphere and to the ether several months ago that Collins would be the best fit. And then Collins went on a magnificent playoff tear with a surprising Atlanta Hawks team. And it seemed like, man, it's doomed that the Hawks are going to have to bring this team back, right? I mean, why wouldn't you bring back a young core that just made the conference finals in their first playoff appearance, right? But it seems like Collins might be the man out of Atlanta. The general manager, according to The Athletic, I think it was The Athletic who reported it.
The team owner, actually.
Team owner said, they'd love to bring it back, but, it's going to be costly, and maybe they don't have the money to match something a max contract. But
basically, we have the full story up on Ken's. It's my pinned tweet. It's a lot of words in there about John Collins' fit, but the more recent news on it is Hawks owner Tony Ressler in conversations with The Athletic being like, some players deserve max contracts, some shouldn't get them, and we love this group, but can we afford to keep everybody together? Probably not. We're probably going to have to, have some people go. And in terms of flexibility, without mentioning John Collins' name yet, he was like, we can either send a message that we will be financially constrained moving forward or that we won't be. And, just reading between the lines in the context here, He doesn't want to be handcuffed to John Collins at a max, because a max for the Hawks would be more expensive than it would be for the Spurs. And even a max for the Spurs that they would then match would be very expensive for them with the money that they have on the books with guys like Capella, Gallinari, Bogdanovic. And then they've got to give Trae Young a max deal. They're going to have to pay Kevin Huerter and DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish. Onyeka Okongwu was pretty solid for them. And when I looked at that Hawks team, as great as John Collins was and as awesome a fit as he is, I think that the depth of that team and the different ways that the different complementary players off of Trae Young, that's the most important part. And when it came to John Collins specifically, the Hawks owner said, we love John, we think he's a great player, and more importantly, an even better person, and we want him to be a part of this organization, and it's our job to come to a deal with him that's fair for both sides, and I hope he's a Hawk. That guy's in a position to guarantee that he's a Hawk next year.
Yeah.
And, I think if that was the plan, he'd be fine saying it. And maybe it's a little bit of hardball, like, no, don't sign that offer sheet. We won't match it. And then, it winds up on their table, and they're like, and he just closes his eyes and signs on the dotted line.
Yeah.
Could be a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But it also could be laying the groundwork for a fan base that's clamoring, hey, we need this guy. You're the billionaire, you pay him. And for him to be like, well, I run a business, which nobody wants to hear as a sports fan from billionaire, but laying the groundwork there for this is why we didn't bring him back.
Yeah.
And if the Spurs offer him a max contract, which they can afford to do, it would start at $28 million a year and leave them like $25 million in remaining cap space. 4 years, about $120 million. And yeah, it would be a quarter of the cap, but it would be it would make him the highest paid player on the team. But they have all of their young core under contract.
Yeah.
And extending Lonnie Walker probably won't be too expensive. Going to have extensions coming up for Keldon and Luka, and then the next guys, but they can afford to take a swing on him and give him the max deal that he wants, because he apparently turned down around $4 and $90 from the Hawks and wants a max deal. Spurs can do that for him, and is he a go-to scorer? No, but he does everything else at such a high level at that modern four, position. If you want to think about how much the game has changed, just look at how he plays the power forward position and how the last guy that the Spurs got at that position from Wake Forest plays it. It's he spaces and hits 40% of his threes.
Yeah.
He put Joel Embiid in a headlock and dunked on him. He's a nuclear powered lob threat, the caliber of which these Spurs ball handlers really haven't played with.
Yeah.
Except for Derek White, who played with John Collins and the Team USA Select team, and actually threw him a lob, which gave me great joy to watch.
He's got the skill set that the Spurs need. That's the biggest holes are what he does best. And Joe, it kind of reminds me, not saying he's Kevin Durant, but it kind of reminds me of how the Warriors are able to bring Durant, even though they had Curry, because they had Curry under a good contract. The Spurs have Murray under a good contract. It also kind of has shades of the 2011-2012 Oklahoma City Thunder, who made a finals and then had a roster decision, Serge Ibaka or James Harden. And the Rockets made the best of that move and got Harden from the Thunder, and then had a team that was a dynasty for, not a championship winning dynasty, but was one of the top playoff contenders in a historic offense for several years to come. Now, do you think the Spurs, Joe, should be the financially flexible team that wins in a situation with a salary strained team like the Hawks? Is that the right move to make this offseason?
Well, I'm not going to say it's a bad move. First of all, anytime you can get Kevin Durant, you're going to do whatever you can to get him in there. So it's really apples and oranges when it comes to John Collins. Professional sports is all about timing, right? I've seen a lot of average players have good playoffs or a good Super Bowl, for example, and they get max deals and then flame out. Not saying that's John Collins, but I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with giving John Collins a max deal. I think he does have all the skill sets you're talking about. I think he would be a great addition to the Spurs, but am I willing to invest that kind of money in John Collins? At this point in time, I'm just not sure I'm ready to do that. So I don't know. I mean, he's certainly in need. He certainly would fit the bill, but I'm just not completely there yet when it comes to offering this guy a max deal. So
can I try to talk
having said all of that, certainly I would do that with Kevin Durant in a heartbeat. I mean, obviously, right? I would do that. Bring Kevin Durant in here. That'd be great. But John Collins, I'm still teetering on the fence with this guy a little bit. Even though I read Tom's article and he makes some great points, and I'm closer to John Collins now than before I read the article, but I'm still not there yet. So write another article, Tom.
Well, I'll try to talk you into it, and if you haven't read it, yeah, it's like I said, up on the site. But the max for him would not be the same as the max for Kevin Durant, for example, because he's only played 6 years or played less than 6 years in the league, and I think a lot of people hear max contract and they're like, "Oh, he's not worth LeBron money." No, he's not, for sure.
No,
but.
We're talking about LaMarcus Aldridge money, basically, right? Are we talking about that?
It would make him a top 40 paid player in the NBA, somewhere between 40 and 35-ish, I think. So it's a sizable contract, but it would be more expensive if he had more experience in the league or if he was re-signing with his own team.
Sure.
And anytime somebody says that they don't want to pay John Collins the max, I'm like, unless you're a part owner of the Spurs, you probably won't have to, right? So I think you'll be good. I think we'll all be good. We don't have to pay him. And the Spurs just got some more people with money in the ownership group. So
they did.
If that's a decision that they're comfortable making, really the only concern, from a team perspective is it too much with the salary cap? And I understand that concern in principle, and I think it's a reason why a lot of teams will steer clear of offering him that kind of money. But because the Spurs have so much space, I think that they're one of the few teams in the league where, maybe the only team in the league, where it would make sense for both parties to give him a max deal. So, I think it would be interesting to put a poll up and see if people would rather overpay in players and assets for Ben Simmons or overpay in dollars for John Collins.
Yeah, we can definitely do that, and we will not include a neither. We're going to make you choose because, that's the fun of it. Now, if Tom wasn't enough to convince you, maybe my Photoshop of John Collins in a Spurs Fiesta jersey will do it because he looks pretty good in the teal, pink, and orange. That's going to do it for today's episode. That's Real Tom Petrini on Twitter. You can find him at Real Tom Petrini. Tom is Kens 5 digital sports writer. He's got plenty of articles on all things John Collins, Becky Hammon, Team USA. We've got more Team USA stuff on the horizon as well. And then, of course, Joe Reinagle, Ken's sports director. You can find him behind the Ken's sports anchor desk weeknights at 10 p.m. And he was also on the 5 p.m. show. Joe, you got anything fun planned this week for the sports coverage?
Well, I mean, obviously we're talking a lot about this, talking a lot about Team USA and what they're going to do. We got to follow that very closely because I don't think we've heard the end of it. Hopefully we have, but, it wouldn't surprise me if something else pops up with that. So a lot of stuff. And then and I know this is the big fun pod, but we're getting ready for Cowboys camp next week already. So the NFL season's about to kick off. So lots of stuff happening as we move out of the summer and get closer to the fall.
That's right. You can catch all of that on Kens 5, the official TV station of the San Antonio Spurs. I'm Jackson Floyd. You can find me at JacksonKens5. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Big Fundamental Podcast, and we'll see you next time.